Hey, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Saturday night, about 10:29 p.m. California time. January 4th, 2025 is the date. Latest activity here on the Earthquake 3D globe shows a 2.1 into the California area, so that's where we're going to start off right now. There is some movement there on Petrolia, also a little spike of an earthquake on China Lake down there in Southern California. So here is our... Well, looks like a 2.2 showing up here across the area of Petrolia within the last couple minutes. That earthquake did show up on the Petrolia station, but not on the Dinsmore station. This is just one of those instances where we've seen earthquake activity like this showing up here and not on the nearby Dinsmore station, and also not being reported. So I've been watching this for a month now, since that 7-pointer stirred up out here, and a lot of earthquake activity going unreported. But for whatever reason, they decided to report this 2.2 within the last few minutes here across Northern California. That is continuing there across the area of Northern California with a couple other 2s in there throughout the last 24-hour period. Let's double check the tremor map here this evening, see what we have for Cascadia tremor, which continues at 0. Nothing going on here for the Cascadia tremor down into the subduction zone. So, interesting. Still looking at some activity back building here across the plate boundary. Now for the rest of California out here, got the typical swarming out there across the Clear Lake volcanic field. This is geothermal operations ongoing, and this is nothing new. That activity is just common. There's earthquakes that are produced during the operations there, and we're looking at over 1,000 earthquakes in the last 30 days across this area of the Cobb Mountain area. Geothermal operations. Nothing going on across the Bay Area as we look further down south here. A couple smaller earthquakes there on the San Andreas Fault, and even as I showed you guys here at the beginning of this update video, one little spike of an earthquake on China Lake. Now, that's obviously an earthquake followed up by what looks like maybe a smaller quake there. When you revise the amplitudes there of the seismograph, China Lake sits up here. Nothing being reported there following that earthquake on the seismograph station. So a little odd. Most of the time we'll see that earthquake activity stir up down here on the seismos and be reported, and then vice versa up here, not reporting. So I don't know what's going on with the USGS this weekend, but it is what it is. Nevada area still seeing some earthquake activity in western Nevada. Nothing major going on there across Southern California for now. I'm only watching. I'm definitely watching this activity right here. There's a couple earthquakes on the San Andreas Fault, the southern segment, and also on this area down here as well. Now, those 4 earthquakes of interest, not very big, but it is in a zone here where the pressure tends to transfer across the plate boundary. So obviously we know we got a lot of strain building up out here along the southern branch of the San Andreas Fault, and it's been building up there for quite a while. Yellowstone National Park, nothing showing up there across that super volcano, but I do want to double check because we had a little bit of activity out there earlier. And there it is showing up on Purple Mountain, Mary Lake, Upper Falls, Joseph's Coat, and Maple Creek as well. So a handful of earthquakes, but nothing being reported here from the USGS. It is the weekend, and that's obviously they're not reporting it. Now, I kind of want to bring in the Ethiopia earthquake activity. Now, obviously, there's a big difference between Yellowstone, the hot spot there, and a rift valley out here, where the land is separating. Obviously, different scenario. But if I was looking at this on Yellowstone, for example, just say this is at Yellowstone supervolcano, we were seeing big-time earthquake activity like Ethiopia is seeing, with upswelling of the land and periodic steaming new vents taking place out here. I would be a little concerned that we're looking at a supervolcano eruption, but this is not Yellowstone. This is obviously a different type of boundary out here, but it is still concerning. And I have seen some videos out here across, not the volcano here, but a little bit further up north around this area where we're seeing some steam explosions come up out of the ground, along with some mud and debris as well. Now, that is localized to the area, but this earthquake event is taking place across a broad area of the Ethiopian rift boundary. And what is a little concerning here to me is that the depth of these earthquakes here are 6 miles deep underneath the area. Now, they've obviously seen some uptick in terms of inflation out here. I want to show you guys, let me go back over here real quick. I found a seismograph station out there in the area, somewhat close there to the Ethiopia Rift boundary. This one in the green triangle here. Now, the rift boundary sits right about here where the earthquake activity is occurring, but the movement is showing up here on the seismograph station. So if you look here at the last, this is going to be the last 24 hours here of earthquake activity. And USGS stating that there's 7 earthquakes here in the last 24 hours of various magnitudes. But on here, obviously they're only counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the bigger ones. If you look in between all these bigger ones, there's a lot more elevated earthquake activity here. So they're seeing a major increase in not only the upswelling of the land, but obviously the earthquake activity here. Now, that's the only seismograph station here I can find local to the area, which sits right over here across this region. I don't know how to pronounce that, but that's where the seismograph station is, and it's picking up all the earthquake activity. I don't know if the EMSC is going to show anything other than what the USGS is reporting. Let me double check here and see. For the last 24 hours, they got roughly about the same. But obviously, as I showed you guys on that seismograph station, that plot, the 24 hours, there's a lot more than what's being shown here on the graph. So the concerning aspect here is that there's so much earthquake activity stirring up out here, 6 miles underneath the region, not localized to one area, just underneath a broad region here of about 70 to 80 miles in length across the rift boundary. So the question is, are we going to see something bigger than just a localized eruption, which is very possible here, due to all the elevated earthquake activity? It's not just in one local area. That would be typical, right? Thinking that maybe one of these volcanoes are going to pop here, the Fantel area. But it's not localized. This is a broader event, and it's deep, which tells me right there that this is probably something bigger than just a localized eruption. If it does take place here, the magnitudes are getting larger. The multitude of quakes out here are getting larger as well. 74 earthquakes here in the last 30 days. Today, what the USGS is reporting is only 7, but as I showed you guys there on the seismograph station, there's a lot more. Some smaller quakes in there as well. I wish I could add those on here, but I don't have the access to that data aside from the raw data, the seismograph station. So there's some big type of event about ready to take place out here across this rift boundary, something that we haven't seen, I don't think, here in history, at least in our recent history. If you think about it here, this is thinning out of the crust, and depending on how much magma is below the area, if we got, a huge amount bubbling up, or, it could go either way. This could be a scary scenario if you really think about it. It's not just one single area. This is a huge, broad event. Yes, there is some steam explosions going on there across this area, north here around this area, but that it kind of makes sense, right? Obviously the steam explosions there are a result of heated areas coming up, heated material coming up from below, tapping into the groundwater, and obviously that's how you get these steam explosions. But this earthquake activity is not getting any shallower, so how big of a blob is down there. You know, could it be way bigger than maybe what we're thinking? A little scary scenario here. You know, I don't think this is just going to be a localized minor event here. There's something big brewing out here across the area of this rift boundary. Any rift boundary there has a potential of something major happening. And we've got to watch that pretty closely here. It is being picked up across, some news agencies and obviously some social media sites out here. And from what I can see, some of these videos that they're sharing of ground steam explosions and whatnot, stuff like that is legit. But there's been no official word on an eruption out here. Those are just, obviously, I hate to say it, but maybe we're looking at a formation of a supervolcano out here. You never know. Very possible and very probable with the amount of earthquake activity, that broad scale out here with that depth. This would scare me if this was happening at Yellowstone National Park. That's why I brought it up here in somewhat of a comparison. But whether it escalates to something that big or not, we'll have to wait and see. All I know is this is not something minor. So I'm going to continue to watch that and focus a little bit more on that. Appreciate some of the emails out there. Some of the folks sending me some links for Ethiopia Rift Boundary information. But I found that this site right here for some of the international seismograph stations, and this is about the only one that's working, that's functionable. I wish I had the GPS options here, but I still have yet to find it. So there's some of the earthquake activity in the last 24 hours. They're reporting 7, but these are the 4s and the 5s that are showing up on the USGS map. But what about all these other earthquakes out there? And there's something going on out there. I think this is going to be some newsworthy activity. And if you look further south along this rift boundary, Zimbabwe area, and this is a fairly new earthquake. Burundi region, 4.5 early this morning. 4.4, fairly recent as well. It looks like something big is brewing underneath this area of land. As far as the magma and convection and whatnot goes underneath this area, I think it's something a little bit bigger than we've seen here in a little while. I'm watching it. It's very intriguing for sure to see this much activity stirring up here across a rift boundary. And again, this is if you look on this scale, this is 50, so we're looking at 60 to 70 mile in length here. This is not just a simple magma intrusion or a dike area. This is something much bigger. So we'll continue to watch that, check back on that with a primary focus on our updates, checking that area. Unfortunately, I don't have any live seismograph stations for that area. I wish I did, but I can't tap into it. A couple of smaller earthquakes there in Southern California there outside of Corona, 1.7 and a 1.1 here within seconds of each other. So a little bit of activity out there. Nothing big going on there across Southern California for now. In fact, if we look at the last 24 hours, the Vanuatu area, 5.3, seeing the largest earthquake here. But notice this cluster of deep earthquakes going on there across the Tonga area once again. This region, man, when things really stir up out here, we can expect some big-time activity to stir up across this area of the plate boundary. So watch for some further escalation here. I think we may already be seeing that with that Vanuatu earthquake there. A lot of deep quakes here across the Tonga region, 300 plus miles below the circus, below the surface there. Not the circus. I don't think we're on the circus yet. So showing up there on the USGS and the EMSC earthquake 3D globe as well. Got a lot of activity stirring up here at the southern end of the Kermadec Trench as well. Looks like some 3s. So fairly active for sure. Typical crunch activity there across the Philippines region, a lot of earthquake activity, and a little bit of swarming here across Japan. Some 4s and 3s stirring up out there, roughly across this area. Nothing being reported across the USGS map, but it's stirring up there on the earthquake 3D globe. Nothing going on across the eastern portion of the country. Quite a bit of activity stirring up in the Middle American Trench, but that's fairly active. I mean, that's fairly normal. But man, we got to watch this down here. Look at that. That's, you got to follow these tracks here and see what's been taking place. Man, there's just a lot of activity there on the Ethiopia area. But we'll watch for that. See if we get further migration along this rift boundary here. Something's definitely forming underneath that region. Let's see here. One earthquake out in the Red Sea, it looks like, 4.6. Yeah, nothing showing up again on the USGS model. I don't know what's going on with these guys, but no, I take that back. That's going to be the Red Sea here. This is going to be way up north around the Iran area, it looks like, right here. All right, well, let's see what else we got for space weather activities. Double check this here. We got a minor radiation storm due to all the solar flares here recently. Just been popping off a lot of protons, mainly affecting the solar polar regions there. This is not the aurora forecast. This is just a radiation storm there across the polar region, mainly focused, again, on the south. A little bit coming in here to the north. That could amplify throughout the evening. With a large number of flares that have been produced and possibly could be here in the forecast. A lot of M flares, a couple X flares as well. In fact, we've seen 3 X flares so far this year from the sunspot number 3947. Here we go, is the culprit of all this activity. And unfortunately, I don't have the color image here to show the complexity of the magnetic structure. Kind of have to take a guess here, but if it's throwing off X flares and numerous M flares, obviously it's quite complex, and that means we need to keep a watchful eye on it. It's currently flaring right now, this area up here, and there's a number of active areas behind the eastern limb that show some potential as well for some stronger flaring. Elevated flare threat remains. These guys have amplified up to about a 20%. I'm basing this to about a 25% chance for X flare. M flare at 65. C flare around 99% chance or so. Proton event around 75. And we'll keep a watchful eye on 3947. Here's a visible disk. There's definitely a trail of activity here. But you could have a super large sunspot there, and as long as if it's not complex, then obviously it's not going to produce any stronger flaring. But that is the source to watch, and that's a lot of activity out here. Goodness, numerous sunspots out here, and more out on the eastern limb and the far side as well. As far as the aurora forecast, things have died off here in the last few hours. Not really expecting much for the remainder of the night. This was the forecast for tonight, but since died off. As far as any major severe weather goes, let's see what we got tomorrow and next week here as that cold air comes in. I think that's going to be the severe weather day. Already seen quite a bit of traffic issues out there with the ice developing on the interstates and the highways. Goodness, I wouldn't even be out there because it's almost guaranteed that you're going to crash. It doesn't matter if you have four-wheel drive or not. An ice-covered road is just not good. Best to kind of stay home there. For the day here tomorrow, Sunday, we got a decent chance here for some tornado activity down there across Louisiana, Mississippi, and eastern Texas in there as well. That's a pretty decent chance, 10% there across Monroe and Jackson area. Some wind. Little bit of hail threat in there as well for the day there on. Where did we go here? Hold on a second. Day one, day two. What's going on there? Day two, day one, they both look the same. Maybe this is for later. Day two, that's identical. Almost identical. Huh. Same time period. That's a little odd. All right, we'll have to check back on that. Maybe different forecasters there, Goss and Windit. But yeah, severe weather obviously going to be a concern here for tomorrow and early next week. There's that low pressure system there, really ramping things up there for the tornado potential. Got to be cautious of that. After that, a much colder air behind it, but a little bit drier until some moisture returns, it looks like, towards next week. And a lot of snow out there across the eastern portion of the country. And it looks like a stuck pattern out here with a lot of cold air coming down from Canada. East of the Rockies here is where it's primarily focused at. High pressure ridging out here across the west coast is super boring. I'm tired of it already. I'm ready for some more rain. But the rain, it just doesn't look like it's in the forecast here for California. If we look at the total accumulated precipitation here, I'll put this into motion. Yeah. Oh my gosh, look at this. California, the only dry spot on the map. Goodness. How worse can it get? Pacific Northwest looks like a little bit of precipitation up there, but man, this is not good. Snowfall. Let's check out the snowfall potential out here. I know a lot of folks are wishing for snow down here across the south, but it looks like that's backed off a lot here, with primarily focused areas northward for some ice and whatnot across this area. But it looks like that's backing off quite a bit. So I guess that's good or bad. It depends on if you wanted snow or not. See, there's a couple more earthquakes there on China Lake. There's another one, excluding the one that I had mentioned at the beginning of this update. Really nothing being reported out here, even though there's earthquake activity. I don't like that. West Coast is lighting up, and there's definitely earthquake activity showing up on the seismos, but nothing being reported there across the Ridgecrest area. Big Island, Hawaii, 2.3 coming in, it looks like. This area, that's from earlier, it looks like. Let me refresh this and see what we have. A couple hot spots out there. Obviously, maybe some backfill happening from the recent eruption. Let's go ahead and check this out there across the Kilauea volcano. Yeah, when I was reading this earlier this morning, I thought that was wrong. They mentioned here that the eruption paused at 8:40 a.m. on Friday, but that wasn't the case. The correct time of the pause was 8:40 p.m. So somebody messed up there with that. It kind of clicked in my mind this morning when I was reading this, but I kind of went through and just read it. But obviously, at a pause right now. That means that we should be looking at the inflation activity rising, right? Would that make sense? With a pause, we should see deformation data come up, and look, just like magic. Here's the pause of the eruption right about here. Obviously, with the depletion of magma from below, we get deflation. As it pauses, inflation there. So going to be interesting to see what happens. We've dropped quite a bit in terms of the this is the yearly chart, but if you look at the past eruptions there, we're a little bit past in terms of deflation here compared to the last one in terms of the total amount. We're still elevated, but be interesting to watch, see what happens here across Kilauea volcano. Either way, it looks like it's on a little pause, and we'll check back on that very active volcano. All right, I'm out of here, folks. Have yourself a good Saturday night. Make sure you guys stay safe out there. Anything could happen at obviously any given time out here. We'll watch the Ethiopia Rift Zone here. Just kind of focus a little bit more on this area because it's got potential for some, some escalated activity out here. That's a broad scale event. Nothing to just skip over. This is something kind of real out here. This is a big time earthquake activity event across a major rift boundary. And this is deep earthquake activity. This is not just happening subsurface here. This is 6 miles or so below the area. I'm just wondering how much volume down here is stirring up. Is this kind of be a big blob of magma that stirs up a super volcano? I guess we'll see what happens here. All right, take care, folks. Have yourself a good night. We'll catch you guys back out here in the morning for the Sunday morning update.